They handed him the company over brunch. Between mimosas and the eggs Benedict. No ceremony. No meeting. No mention of me. Just a signed document slid across the table, next to the silver coffee pot. Dad patted my brother's back and said, "The future belongs to new blood." Mom nodded, dabbing at her lipstick-stained napkin like she hadn't just witnessed a burial. I was sitting 3 chairs down, peeling the rind off a slice of orange. My name wasn't said once. Not even as a footnote. I'd been with the company for 25 years. Laid the foundation for the very building we were eating in. Had calluses older than my brother's resume. And still. No acknowledgement. No discussion. Not even a thank you. Just a silent expectation that I'd get up, go back to the site, and finish the week like nothing had changed. So I did. I stood, tucked in my chair, nodded toward the table, and drove back to the site where I'd been managing concrete delivery for the new municipal courthouse. I didn't call out the insult. Didn't ask for an explanation. Didn't scream or curse or plead. Instead, I picked up my phone and made one call. Not to my parents. Not to my brother. To my lawyer. A woman they forgot I'd been working with for years. "Start the asset trace," I said. "I want every contract in my name tagged, every property lien evaluated, every supply account reviewed for ownership." She didn't ask questions. She'd been waiting for this day longer than I had. They thought they were transferring a business. They didn't realize they'd just handed over the shell. The real weight, the land, the trademarks, the supplier relationships, the retirement portfolios, those were all tied to me. Quietly. Legally. Permanently. They thought I'd spent 25 years obeying. I'd actually spent 25 years positioning. And now, while they celebrated their fresh new CEO with glossy brochures and company-wide emails, I began quietly removing every brick they built their illusion on. One contract. One clause. One buried title deed at a time. They didn't know yet. But by the time they realized who actually owned the company, the real one, the one that couldn't be captured in spreadsheets or corner offices, it would be far too late. The future may belong to new blood. But the foundation? That still belonged to me. And soon, it would be the only thing left standing. I was 16 when I laid my first foundation. Not metaphorically, literally. A farmhouse in Dutch Hollow. Middle of winter. Frozen soil, biting wind, boots 2 sizes too big because they'd been Dad's first. We were a small crew back then. Just my father, 2 of his buddies from the Navy, and me. My job was simple: show up, shut up, and shovel. And I did. Every day after school, every weekend, every summer break. No pay. No complaints. That's just how it was in our family. You work to learn, not to earn. We called the business Hayes and Sons Construction long before there were actual sons involved. Back then, it was aspirational. By the time my brother, Luke, was born, I was already pouring slabs solo. Running site logistics. Managing crews twice my age who only half listened until they saw I didn't flinch when problems started. Luke was the golden one. Bright smile, natural charm, effortless grades. The kind of kid you took photos of even when nothing special was happening. Mom loved to dress him like a magazine ad. Dad used to joke that Luke's only callus came from lifting trophies. But they loved him. Loudly. Visibly. I didn't mind. Not then. There was pride in being the steady one. The one who didn't need attention to do the job. The one who stayed late when weather rolled in, who knew how to patch drywall, negotiate rebar prices, and cook dinner for 2 tired parents. I wore my reliability like armor. At 19, I put off college to keep the company afloat during a lean winter. At 24, I bought our first warehouse in my name. Dad's credit was shot from a bad supplier deal. Ross, April 8, 2025, 7:03 p.m. At 30, I negotiated a state contract that pulled us out of debt and into six-figure territory. Luke, meanwhile, got his MBA. Interned at places with polished desks and Italian espresso. Learned to speak in phrases like brand alignment and vertical synergy. When he joined the company at 26, it was a spectacle. Photos. A press release. A cake shaped like a blueprint. I was happy for him. Genuinely. I told myself he'd help us grow. Modernize. Reach clients I couldn't. But deep down, I saw what he didn't, that his desk was made of my concrete. His new email signature. Paid for by the deals I landed. The company logo he updated. Designed by the woman I married and later divorced, after too many nights alone while I was still on site. Still, I said nothing. Not when he cut labor costs I knew would bite us later. Not when he fired 2 guys I trained without consulting me. Not even when he started referring to me as the operations guy. I watched. I worked. I waited. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. Because I knew something Luke didn't. Ownership isn't about title. It's about leverage. And over 25 years, I'd built a quiet empire inside the empire. I personally owned the lot our main warehouse stood on. When Dad couldn't qualify for the bank loan, I used my credit, my signature. It was a formality then. A silent agreement. But paperwork doesn't honor family sentiment. It honors names. The material supplier we'd used for 2 decades. Their loyalty wasn't to the company, it was to me. I'd fixed their busted forklift in 07. Covered their payroll delay in 13. Took the owner's kid on as an apprentice when no one else would. The website domain. I registered it. My credit card. My login. The insurance policies. The heavy equipment lease. The subcontractor licenses in 3 counties. All mine. Quietly. Legally. Dismissed as administrative details by Luke and even Dad. But those details were leverage. Those details were power. And while my family posed for holiday cards in dress shirts and shiny helmets, I was building a house beneath theirs. One with deeper roots. Stronger beams. And a key they'd forgotten I held. So when they handed him the company over brunch, with champagne and toast points, they didn't even realize they were passing the walls, not the foundation. They gave him the crown. I still held the earth beneath it. And now. I was ready to start shaking it. The first thing Luke did as CEO was schedule a brand summit. No joke. A brand summit. 2 days after brunch. He booked the conference room at a downtown co-working space, $1,500 for the day. Ordered catered lunches, printed lanyards with our names on them, even had a slide deck titled Hayes & Sons 2.0, Vision, Velocity, Victory. My name was spelled wrong on the lanyard. When I walked in, Luke was on stage talking about pivoting toward scalable client experiences. He used words like agile synergy and heritage disruption. I'd built sidewalks and shelters through 3 recessions. I'd poured foundations in storms, patched roofs in 100-degree heat, trained guys who couldn't read blueprints but knew how to work. And here was my younger brother, explaining our business like it was a social media platform. At lunch, he handed me a packet titled Role Realignment. Inside was a new title, Field Operations Specialist. No executive access. No financial oversight. No say in hiring. You're the backbone, man, he said, clapping my shoulder. This just lets you focus on what you're best at. He smiled like he was doing me a favor. Like I should be grateful he let me stay at all. I didn't say a word. Not when they reassigned my assistant to a client development pod. Not when they changed the lock codes to the upstairs office without telling me. Not even when I saw the internal memo describing me as legacy talent and recommending I be phased out within 6 months. That memo was an accident. A junior staffer, new to the system, copied me by mistake. But it was all there, bullet points in plain language. Ross, April 8, 2025, 7:03 p.m. Operations can be automated. Lack of tech adaptability. Brand image not aligned with growth strategy. Consider consulting transition or retirement incentive. Retirement. At 48. I stared at the email for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed what I'd suspected for years. They never saw me as a partner. Only a placeholder. A bridge from Dad's era to Luke's ambitions. I was too loyal to be dangerous. Too quiet to be political. Too useful to get rid of, until now. I forwarded the memo to my private email. Saved a PDF copy. Then I went to lunch like nothing had changed. Luke texted me that afternoon, a selfie with Dad in front of the new logo. Big day. Wish you could have joined us for the reveal. The same logo I designed 6 years ago. The same typeface Ellen, my ex-wife, picked from a list of fonts I brought home late one night. They removed my name from the website that week. It went from "founded by Paul Hayes and his son" to "a legacy of leadership passed from father to future." No mention of me. Just a caption, "Family means building together." The final break came on a Tuesday. Luke called a meeting. Just me and him. No agenda. No coffee. He sat across from me, all casual charm and rehearsed concern. "Look, I know this transition's been tough," he said. "Dad's getting older. We've got to think long-term. Maybe it's time you started thinking about your next chapter." My next chapter. I repeated, voice flat. Retirement package. Partial buyout. Consultant hours if you want to stay involved. We're not pushing you out, just thinking proactively. I studied him. The fresh haircut, the tailored blazer, the way he avoided eye contact just slightly. "Is that what Dad wants?" I asked. Luke hesitated. "It's what makes sense." I nodded slowly. Then I smiled. A real one. Because in that moment, I knew he was bluffing. He didn't know what I owned. He thought the business was paper. Revenue charts. Expense reports. Email signatures. He didn't know I still held 60% of the land titles under our active projects. Didn't know I was co-signer on 3 of our biggest equipment leases. Didn't know Mom quietly transferred her voting shares to me 6 years ago when Dad had a health scare. He didn't know the foundation wasn't his. He only held the walls. So I said, "Okay. I'll think about it." Then I shook his hand. And that night, I didn't go home. I went to the storage unit where I kept the old ledgers, the original contracts, the notarized statements nobody ever looked at anymore. And I began assembling the truth, piece by quiet piece. They thought they'd buried me under titles and paperwork. They had no idea I'd built the vault they were standing on. There's a silence you only hear when your name disappears from your life. It's not loud. Not cruel. It's the absence of being seen. No more phone calls from vendors asking for my input. No more texts from Dad asking if the crew made it in before the storm. No more employees swinging by my office to ask for advice they trusted more than HR forms. Even the guys on site stopped looking me in the eye. They weren't being rude. They were just adjusting. Figuring out where I stood now. One day I stood by the fence, watching them pour foundation for a new civic library. That was supposed to be my project. One I'd bid for, negotiated, and walked city reps through, lot by lot. But now, it was Luke's. His name was on the contract. His press photo in the city council announcement. His handshake closing the deal. I stood there for half an hour, pretending I was just checking progress, while the same guy I trained 3 years ago gave instructions I used to give. The next day, I didn't show up to the office. No one called. No one asked where I was. I sat at home, in the den that still smelled faintly of sawdust and old leather. There was a photo on the mantel, me and Dad, arms around each other, the first week we broke even after 2 years in the red. He used to say I was the reason we survived that recession. Ross, April 8, 2025, 7:03 p.m. Now he said nothing. I opened my drawer and took out the deed for the Walker Street property. 42,000 square feet. I bought it under my name in 2011 when the company couldn't take on another loan. We'd used it as a storage yard, then later as a rental to offset taxes. It was worth nearly $2. $3 million now. No one remembered that. I ran my hand along the edge of the paper. The quiet weight of it. The way something so dry could carry the proof of a decade's work. There were 30 more deeds in the drawer. 30 quiet acknowledgments that my name did matter, even if they'd forgotten. That weekend, I drove to Mom's place. She was watching the garden show she liked, sipping tea from the same chipped mug she's had since '96. I sat down beside her and didn't say much. Eventually, she looked at me and said, "They moved your desk." I blinked. "What?" "At the office. Your father told me yesterday. Said Luke wanted to make space for a collaboration pod." I stared at the floor. "Did you agree with it?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside were the transfer papers. Her 25% voting share, signed over to me. The ones we'd arranged years ago, after Dad's heart scare. "I thought you might need to be reminded," she said softly. "You're not invisible, son. You're just quiet. And sometimes, quiet men need proof they're still in the room." I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I put the envelope in my jacket pocket and nodded. That night, I sat in the dark and stared out at the backyard. For the first time in 30 years, I thought about walking away. Selling my shares. Leaving the state. Starting over in some small town where no one called me legacy talent. I imagined a simple life. Teaching woodworking. Running a tool shop. Owning a dog. No suits. No meetings. No brunches with fake congratulations. Just me. A shed. And silence that wasn't punishment. But then I thought of the employees, the ones who still believed in what we built. The single dads whose hours I fought to protect. The veteran I hired even when his resume was blank. The kid with no degree who just needed someone to take a chance. And I remembered Ellen's voice, my ex-wife, on the night I told her Luke would probably run the company someday. "You're the reason it exists," she'd said. "If they forget that, make sure you don't." I looked around my house. The photos. The ledgers. The permits. The contracts. They'd erased me on paper. But they couldn't erase what I knew. Or what I owned. And suddenly, the grief started to change. It didn't harden. It clarified. They'd buried me in silence. Now I would return in stone. I didn't need to announce anything. People who build things from the ground up know this: real foundations are poured quietly, early, and without fanfare. And so was my decision. I didn't tell Luke. Didn't tell Dad. Didn't send an email or call a meeting. I simply began. Step 1 was the contracts. Hayes and Sons didn't own them. I did. The supplier agreements, the land leases, even the licensing rights for our training program, all registered under my name, brokered through my LLC. I'd created it years ago for liability reasons when Dad's insurance lapsed after a bad accident. At the time, it was a stopgap. But the documents never changed. No one followed up. No one asked. So I called our top 5 subcontractors. Same message, different wording. There'll be a brief pause in payment routing. Please direct all future invoices to Hayes Strategic Holdings. Every one of them agreed. Why? Because I'd been the one to help their crews when a storm hit and wages were delayed. I'd shown up on weekends. Answered calls at 2 a.m., drove replacement tools across counties without being asked. I wasn't their legacy talent. I was their trust. Next came the warehouse. Our biggest asset, the one we use to stage equipment, store steel, host safety briefings, sat on land I owned personally. A fact forgotten in the chaos of growth. Ross, April 8, 2025, 7:03 p.m. I contacted the new CFO, a woman Luke hired to modernize finance. I sent her a formal lease termination letter with 60 days notice. No explanation. Within 3 hours, Luke was calling me. "Hey," he said. "What's this about the warehouse?" I let the pause stretch. "It's mine," I said. "Always has been. The lease is ending. You can't just, that's where half our staging." "I can," I replied. And I did. "But Dad, we built that together." "No," I said calmly. "I built it. You just showed up with a ribbon and a camera." He went quiet. I didn't hang up. I just let him sit in the silence I'd lived in for months. "Let's talk about this," he finally said. "Face to face." "Sure," I said. "My lawyer will join." Then I pulled the next thread, the company vehicles. Out of 12 trucks, 9 were leased through my personal credit. I'd stepped in during the 2008 financial crisis when the company couldn't qualify for fleet financing. They never refinanced. I called the lender, confirmed account control, and scheduled repossession of all 9 units. Not all at once. 1 per week. Just slow enough that it would sting. Finally, I requested an internal audit. Not of the company. Of the ownership structure. With Mom's 25% voting shares now fully in my hands, legally documented and irrevocable, I held majority control. Dad's shares were still active, but silent. He hadn't attended a board meeting in 18 months. His health had made that difficult. Luke assumed that meant leadership defaulted to him. It didn't. In the original company charter, buried in a dusty folder in a locked cabinet no one opened anymore, voting shares trumped titles in matters of succession. And with mine combined with Mom's, I had the votes. Quietly. Legally. Finally. That evening, I sat on my porch. Same porch I'd sanded by hand in 2003. Same steps Ellen and I had watched our son take his first steps on. The night air was clean. Crisp. I watched the lights in the distance. The skyline of a city I helped build, brick by brick. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I felt patient. Precise. Because the difference between demolition and collapse. One is loud. The other is planned. Revenge isn't a scream. It's a signature. It's a locksmith changing codes while no one notices. It's an email with, "per your request," in the subject line. It's your name vanishing from a plaque before you realize you didn't own the wall it hung on. My revenge didn't start with a blow-up. It started with a calendar update. Private shareholders meeting, 9 a.m., Friday. Just a formality. Tucked inside the company schedule. Sent through the proper channels. Luke didn't even notice until Thursday afternoon. The meeting took place in a rented conference room downtown. Not the office. Not Dad's old boardroom. I brought 2 things. 1, a copy of the company's original bylaws. 2, my attorney. Luke walked in late. He wasn't even wearing a tie. "Is this about the warehouse?" he asked, breathless, like he'd jogged in from the parking garage. "Because I talked to Megan and we." "This is about control," I said. I handed him the shareholder ledger. He scanned the numbers. When he saw the total, 52%, his face lost color. "You've got Mom's shares," he whispered. His voice wasn't angry. It was small. I nodded. "Legally transferred. Notarized. Irrevocable." "But, Dad, he never." "Dad hasn't voted since 2021. Which, per Section 7 of the Charter, constitutes voluntary abstention unless otherwise documented." I turned the page. "And since he never documented otherwise, those votes default to majority control." My lawyer slid the resolution across the table. "I'm not removing you, Luke," I said quietly. "But your title changes. Effective immediately, you're Director of Community Partnerships." He stared at me. "You're serious?" I looked him in the eye. "Very." That same week, I replaced the CFO. She never saw it coming. I thanked her for her service. Paid out her contract in full. Ross, April 8, 2025, 7:03 p.m. Then handed her the updated org chart, with her name missing. She wasn't bitter. Just confused. "I thought I was doing everything right," she said. "You were," I replied. "For Luke's company. But this isn't his company anymore." I reinstated 3 veteran foremen Luke had laid off last year to improve optics. They returned to work within days. No fanfare. Just firm handshakes and quiet tears in their eyes. "We didn't think you'd come back," one of them said. "I never left," I replied. "They just stopped seeing me." I restored the logo. The original one. The one Ellen helped design, simple, sturdy, built to last. The new version, all gloss and angles, was quietly phased out. No announcement. Just, removed. People noticed. But no one complained. Because it felt right. Familiar. Honest. Like something real had returned. Next, I cancelled the brand summit. Sent refund notices to every vendor. Cancelled catering. Released the venue. In its place, I scheduled a field barbecue, same parking lot we'd used since 2005. Old school grill. Metal folding chairs. Tool raffle at the end. The RSVP list filled in 2 days. Then I called the city council. The same woman Luke had courted with press photos and sleek pitches. I sent her a binder, the actual project documents, with my name on every page. The real timelines, budgets, supplier contacts. A week later, her assistant called. "We'd like to meet with you." Luke's invitation stopped arriving after that. The final move was the quietest. A nameplate. 3 inches wide. Brushed aluminum. M. Hayes, founder. Placed right below Dad's. I didn't add mine above it. I didn't need to. Because revenge wasn't about being on top. It was about being undeniable. And the most satisfying part? No yelling. No threats. No drama. Just silence. The kind Luke had given me. Echoed back, lined with steel. It didn't fall apart overnight. But the cracks showed fast. Luke stopped showing up early. Then he stopped showing up at all. At first, people whispered he was working remote. Then they stopped whispering and started shrugging. Because work kept moving, faster, cleaner, better. Without him. The internal reports told the story. In the first quarter after the restructure, equipment delays dropped 30%. Subcontractor disputes. Down to 0. Overtime complaints. Cut in half. Revenue. Up 18%. The numbers didn't lie. Neither did the crews. They stayed later. Smiled more. Started calling the place ours again. Not his. Dad heard the shift before he saw it. One morning he showed up unannounced. Walked into the new conference room, looked around. Same faces. Same walls. But something was different. He sat across from me. "You didn't yell," he said. "No," I replied. "Didn't need to." He nodded, slow. Then he pulled something from his coat, the original Hayes & Sons hammer, engraved, dulled at the edges from decades of use. "I kept this for the day I stepped back. Thought I'd hand it to Luke." I said nothing. He placed it on the table between us. "I was wrong," he said. Luke tried to pivot. Started a consulting brand, Build Forward Solutions. New logo. New tagline. Same ego. He posted online. Glossy headshots, startup lingo, promises of vision-led operations. No one bit. The network he thought he had wasn't loyal to him. It had always been loyal to what we built. And I was still standing on the foundation. His posts slowed. His email list went quiet. Eventually, even the automated newsletters stopped coming. The house he and his fiancée had bought on the company's old line of credit. The payments bounced. The truck with the vanity plate, CEO 2023. Repossession notice, right there on the windshield. I never said a word. Didn't rub it in. Didn't gloat. But I knew he felt it. Because when your rise was built on borrowed power, the fall feels like gravity finding you again. CFOs from other firms started calling me. Not to poach me. Just to talk. Ross, April 8, 2025, 7:03 p.m. Whatever you did, one of them said, you turned the ship without making a splash. That's when I realized. The consequences weren't just his. They were mine too. But mine came as respect. Trust. Authority earned, not inherited. At the next industry banquet, I was asked to present the Community Leadership Award. The host introduced me as, the man who kept building while others stopped watching. I looked out across the crowd. Some of them had known Luke. Fewer remembered his titles. All of them remembered my work. That was enough. After the banquet, I drove home. No speeches. No celebration. Just me, the road, and the memory of what it cost to stand tall. I parked, walked into the quiet of my home, and placed the Hayes hammer back on its wall mount. Right where it belonged. Not as a weapon. As a reminder. That the truest consequences are the ones you never have to deliver yourself. They simply arrive. Like truth. Like morning. It happened on a Tuesday. Mid-morning. Quiet street. Overcast sky. I was home sanding the edge of a porch swing I'd been restoring for weeks. Ellen always said I worked too hard without building anything just for myself. Luke pulled into the driveway like he still belonged there. He didn't even knock. Just opened the gate, walked around back, and stood in the yard like a man trying to remember his footing. I didn't look up right away. Let the silence work for me. Eventually, he spoke. I didn't come to fight. I kept sanding. You took everything, he said. I paused. Looked at him. No, I said. I reclaimed what was already mine. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I gestured to the chair opposite me. He sat. Quiet now. Smaller. I worked hard, he said finally. I had ideas. I know, I said. I wanted to grow the company. You tried. He looked up, surprised. Like he expected bitterness. Or revenge. But I didn't have any left. Only truth. I didn't do this to hurt you, I said. I did it because you forgot where you came from. And who laid the first bricks before you got here. He looked away. The wind moved the trees overhead. I was always in your shadow, he muttered. No, I said softly. You were beside me. You just stopped looking sideways. Silence again. I could have been better, he admitted. Still can be, I said. He nodded, slowly. I don't know where to start. I looked at him then, really looked. Saw the cracks. The pieces that were real beneath the posturing. You start by building. One thing at a time. The right way this time. We sat in the silence that followed. No promises. No reconciliation speeches. Just two brothers. Finally level. He didn't ask for his old role back. Didn't beg for control. Didn't even ask for money. What he asked was simple. Can I help with the next project? And I said. Yes. Not because he deserved it. But because I was done carrying the weight of bitterness. The next week, he showed up to the job site. No title. No desk. Just gloves and a clipboard. He took orders. Listened. Carried lumber when no one else wanted to. And slowly, the crew stopped flinching when they saw him. Started nodding. Then talking. Then trusting again. That was his confrontation. Not with me. With himself. And mine. Mine was over the moment I said nothing when they gave him the company. Because silence isn't surrender. Sometimes, silence is the sound of a wall being built. Stronger. Wiser. Thicker than before. The office feels different now. Not just the paint or the layout. Not even the new staff. It's something quieter, like the walls finally exhale when I walk in. No more tension in meetings. No more scripts in smiles. Just work. Honest work. The kind that stains your palms and clears your head. I kept the corner desk. Not because I needed it. But because it reminded me where I used to sit, quietly running everything behind the scenes. Now, people come to that desk for answers. Not permission. Just guidance. And I give it. Slowly. Carefully. Sometimes with stories. Ross, April 8, 2025, 7:03 p.m. Sometimes with silence. Because that's the thing about being erased. Once you remember who you are, no one can do it to you again. Luke still shows up. 3 times a week. Early. No fanfare. He doesn't wear the CEO jacket anymore. Just jeans and a flannel, like we all used to. Sometimes he stays late, helping the crew clean up. Sometimes he leaves early, attending a business class at the community college. He never makes a scene. He never asks for credit. And I never ask for an apology. Because the best apologies are quiet, ongoing, and real. Mom visits the office once a month. Brings donuts. Sits in on planning meetings. She says she just likes feeling the hum of a place that still builds. I believe her. Dad comes less often. But when he does, he doesn't speak much. He walks the site. Nods. Sometimes smiles at nothing in particular. Last time he was here, he stood by the new community center we're helping build. This, he said, gesturing to the concrete curing beneath the sun, is what I always hoped for. I didn't answer. Because some moments don't need words. At home, things are slower. I rebuilt the porch swing. Repainted the shed. Started reading again, books I hadn't touched in years. And I sleep better. Not because I won. But because I stopped defending what didn't need defending. Sometimes, I think about selling the business. Starting over somewhere warm. Quiet. Far from family drama and shareholder meetings. But then I see the new apprentice, 19, eager, hands blistered from his first week, asking if he nailed the beam right. And I know I'm not done yet. Not because I have something to prove. But because I finally get to choose what I build next. One Saturday morning, I went back to the old farmhouse site. The one I helped build when I was 16. The one with frozen soil and crooked boots and no idea what kind of man I'd become. The house still stood. Faded paint, new porch, kids' toys in the yard. I didn't knock. Just stood across the road and watched. And I smiled. Not because I was proud. Not because I missed it. But because I finally understood what peace feels like. It's not being remembered. It's knowing you never needed to be seen to matter. They thought legacy was about names on paper. But legacy is the sound of a hammer echoing through winter. The smell of fresh concrete at dawn. The quiet way a beam holds weight without being seen. They took the crown. I kept the cornerstone. And in the end, it wasn't the title that mattered. It was the hands that never stopped building. Because some men inherit walls. Others become the foundation. And foundations? They never ask to be noticed. They just hold everything up, long after the rest has faded.